So let's kick off the hour by discussing a new report by New York Times journalist James Risen. If you don't know who James Risen is, the name probably sounds familiar. He is actually the reporter who the Obama administration may send to prison because he refuses to turn over his confidential sources. Does that sound familiar, right? So it's a big example of the Obama administration's war on whistleblowers, their war on the media, but actually, that's not the story or even the presidential administration we're going to talk about today. The New York Times story by James Risen actually has to do with the previous administration and the previous war in Iraq. More specifically, the infamous mercenary war profiteers Blackwater. Blackwater, who of course have since changed their name. They first changed it to Z, and then they changed it again. I think they're now called Avicii, I think. No, wait. That's a DJ. No. They're actually now called Academy because, I don't know, they're the thinking man's mercenaries. They are the intellectual private army, if you will. So if you're not familiar with Blackwater, or you just need a refresher because it's been a while since we've had a reason to talk about them, I guess, here are some of Blackwater's greatest hits from the first Iraq War. For starters, they are, of course, most known for the massacre of Iraqi civilians at Nisour Square. Currently, right now, 4 Blackwater employees are on trial for that in Washington, D.C. In the Nisour Square massacre, 17 civilians were slaughtered. Some 20 others were wounded. Blackwater was also caught illegally smuggling arms into Iraq in bags of dog food. They drew their weapons on U.S. soldiers. They crashed into an embassy wall. They harassed Iraqi civilians, shot at Iraqi civilians unprovoked. But that's not all. That's just some of the stuff we knew before. Reading from James Risen's new report in the New York Times, quote, weeks before Blackwater guards fatally shot 17 civilians at Baghdad's Nisour Square in 2007, the State Department began investigating the security contractor's operations in Iraq. But the inquiry was abandoned after Blackwater's top manager there issued a threat, quote, that he could kill the government's chief investigator, and, quote, no one could or would do anything about it as we were in Iraq, according to department reports, end quote. So let me run that by you just one more time. The top Blackwater manager in Iraq threatened to murder a U.S. State Department investigator, a U.S. State Department employee. He said that he could kill him and that nothing could or would be done about it. And really, how patriotic, right? What a freedom fighter this Blackwater employee is, huh? Really. So the investigator, he writes a report saying that because of the non-existent oversight over there, quote, Blackwater contractors saw themselves above the law. They also, the contractors instead of department officials are in command, in control in Iraq. It's really crazy, right? So, but I mean, if you think about it, Iraq was a war for oil. It was a war for profit, right? So why shouldn't the contractors be in charge? I mean, they're the ones making all the money. Shouldn't they be the ones making the decisions here, right? I mean, that's what makes sense. Anyway, though, it's important to remember here that this was actually a couple of weeks before the Nisour Square massacre. Reading from the New York Times again, quote, they found that Blackwater's staffing on security details for American diplomats had been changed without State Department approval, reducing guards on many details from 8 to 10. The document said Blackwater guards were storing automatic weapons and ammunition in their private rooms, where they were also drinking heavily and partying with frequent female visitors. They were carrying weapons which had never been certified and they were not authorized to use. Armored vehicles Blackwater used to protect American diplomats were poorly maintained and deteriorating. Investigators found that 4 drunk guards had commandeered one heavily armored $180,000 vehicle to drive to a private party and then crashed into a concrete barrier. Blackwater was also overbilling the State Department by manipulating personal records, using guards assigned to State Department contract for other work, and falsifying other staffing data on the contract, the investigators concluded. End quote. So yeah, all that, right? All of that corruption, all of that abuse should be enough to get them their contract withdrawn. Should be enough to say, we are not going to use Blackwater anymore. You guys are horrible and crazy. And this is before Nisour Square, right? This was all in this report. And the Blackwater manager in Iraq, a man named Daniel Carroll, threatened to murder the investigator. Reading from the Times again, he said, quote, that he could kill me at that very moment and no one could or would do anything about it as we are in Iraq. Mr. Carroll's statement was made in a low, even tone of voice. His head was slightly lowered and his eyes were fixed on mine. End quote. What a bloody psychopath, huh? What a psychopath. A psychopath working for a company that is making billions of dollars in Iraq, right? Billions of dollars profiting off of death and blood. And so after the investigator had his life threatened, what happened then? What happened then? Did the United States withdraw Blackwater's contracts? Did they kick Blackwater out of Iraq? Or at the very minimum, did they demand that this specific manager be fired or removed from his spot in Iraq? Did they do any of that? Of course they didn't. Of course they didn't. No. What they did do, though, was order the investigator to leave. They said the investigator has to stop bugging Blackwater. Not Blackwater, not the psychopath Blackwater manager. Oh no, the State Department investigator who had his life threatened by a for-profit mercenary for doing his job and trying to expose abuse. They did nothing. Nothing with the report of abuses. Nothing with the countless Blackwater abuses. And then, a couple of weeks later, the massacre at Nisour Square happened, and then they couldn't really deny it anymore. They couldn't fight it anymore. They tried for a long time. It still took a while for Blackwater to be taken away. And, there's still subsidiaries of Blackwater that still get, tons of contracts from us today. But that is when that was officially kind of the end, the beginning of the end for Blackwater, when eventually Eric Prince sold them and they changed their name to Avicii and all that stuff. So anyway, I wanted to discuss this story specifically because what it does is it really does serve as a reminder for us, as we have all of these neocons, all of these even center democratic warmongers just drooling at the bit, trying to get us into war in Iraq again. It reminds us who is really in charge, who really has the final say when it comes to war. And the sad truth and horrible truth is, it's the war profiteers. It's the mercenaries. It's the military contractors. Again, this State Department investigator had his life threatened. He was threatened with murder, and the United States government sided with the for-profit mercenaries. And they continued to pay them. It's really, really madness. Let's just hope that the Obama administration doesn't send the reporter James Risen to jail so he can keep putting out great stories like this one. We'll be right back.